We are talking from Ho Chi Minh City, which is more and more called again, Saigon. So, and I said to one of my colleagues, is there a better place in the world to talk about China than in Vietnam? So it is very interesting indeed to spend some time here in this amazing country. I have been ambassador here a long time ago, but I have seen a transformation here in a very short time. And the last visit I had was 6 years ago, and I see tremendous changes. And that's thanks to innovation, thanks to enterprises, thanks to good, stable policies. We are also the new kid in town, if I may say. The Europe Asia Center is indeed pretty new. We only are in existence 2 years, but we are not our think tank is not our main focus, but we are happy to share our ideas on subjects as today's on EU and China relations. When I say the new kid in town, our focus is more on building platforms of exchanges and platforms of dialogue between Europe and Asia. And of course, China is also one of our primary target countries. And we have been able the last couple of weeks to indeed relaunch a dialogue on particularly on culture. We have organized in Brussels and in London a major exhibition on the Song Dynasty paintings. And I must say, in all the sometimes political tensions we are knowing today, it is quite amazing how much interest there is for Chinese culture in Europe, and also, I'm sure, in China for European culture. But having said that, as an introduction, I was going through the newspapers, here in Saigon this morning, and I was struck by one of the headlines, and one of the headlines was, China is back on the international circuit. They were calling it the re-entry of China in the world, and it's not surprising that this re-entry is linked or connected to the lifting of the COVID restrictions in China. And also, if you remember, in November, we had the G20 summit in Bali. There's a very promising meeting between President Biden and President Xi Jinping, followed by also a meeting by the President of the EU Council, Charles Michel, in Beijing, and of course, Chancellor Scholz. And more high-level meetings are in preparation. Mr. President Macron is preparing now a visit to China. And I heard also that the Australian Prime Minister is very actively preparing a visit or a bilateral visit. So not only the lifting of the COVID restriction, but I see also that China is, as I said, your President Xi Jinping, he was recently in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states. So this is a sign that there is something moving. Moving from the side of China, moving also from the side of the EU. And talking about EU-China relations, let me say very bluntly, I think the EU remains very much engaged with China. And if you look, we already mentioned, the trade, the economic activity. And the trade links as such continue to be very important. And China is the EU's most important trading partner. And if you look at all that, about 92% of trade is not at all concerned by the EU's strategic goal, what they call the strategic autonomy, to be more or less dependent, from China on technology, on on strategic raw materials and so on and so forth. So 92% of trade is covered by the normal trade rules which exist, the bilateral trade rules we have between EU and China, but also the multilateral trade rules, because China is a WTO member since the beginning of 2000. So this is a very important point, that the trading relationship is not so much affected by this strive for more strategic autonomy. Of course, what is important is in all that is environment. Europe needs China, to be successful with this green transition. This is a very important point. You know how much we've put focus on the Green Deal within the European Commission, and our targets, which are very ambitious in Europe, to go to a sustainable economy, a very low or zero CO2 footprint by 2050. This can only be achieved in cooperation, with countries like China, where they have indeed an enormous, I would say, know-how and technological know-how. So on the one hand, we want to be less dependent, I'm sorry, on China, but on the other hand, we need China, to tackle some global issues which are important for the sustainability of this planet, which is indeed climate change. So this is a very difficult, and sometimes it creates tensions not only between China and the EU, but within the EU itself. So all this is very important as I see it. But of course, there is one caveat, if I may say so, and the caveat is the geopolitical situation in the world. And all the hotspots, they were mentioned. I mean, it's about Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, which I find terribly unjustified. What happened, what Russia did, this aggression to a sovereign, unprovoked country such as Ukraine. So that's one. Secondly, it's also about what is going to happen, in Asia. I mean, there are hotspots in Asia which needs to be tackled in a cooperative manner, and it's not only about the South China Sea, but also the whole question of what is happening with North Korea. So those are a couple of ideas I wanted to put forward, and
Okay.
and so that's. Thank you very much.